"I'm not running," I told him, my voice steady in the dark of his study. "And I'm not begging, so you can stop waiting for me to break, Your Majesty. I've seen what you are. I'm still here." His wolf had gone very still in his eyes, that ancient, terrible stillness that means a predator is recalculating everything it thought it knew. And I watched him realize, for the first time in maybe centuries, that the equation had changed. "How did you," he started, "say excuse me and mean it?" I smiled, small and sad, the same way I looked at you now and didn't flinch. Then I let myself remember how we got here. The beginning the road had been quiet for 4 hours when I realized I was about to become collateral damage in a territorial dispute. I was holding a basket of bread. This detail shouldn't matter, but it does. It matters because it meant I had my hands full when the rumble came, that low, bone-deep vibration that every Omega recognizes. Every Omega fears, the sound of an alpha's wolf crossing territory, with the kind of casual authority that suggests he's never once wondered if he had the right to be anywhere. I stepped to the side of the road. This is what they teach you when you're born Omega in a kingdom ruled by wolves. When the predator comes, you don't run. Running triggers the hunt. You don't cower. Submission just sharpens their teeth. You make yourself small, move to the edges, and become a non-threat. You become beneath notice. The trees moved before he did. Ancient oak branches actually bowed as the wolf burst through the undergrowth, and I remember thinking, with that detached observation that only comes when you're about to witness something profound, that this particular alpha had never once worried about fitting between trees. Why would he? The forest moved for him. He was enormous. Silver and charcoal, with the kind of supernatural muscle that only comes from centuries of being the thing everything else fears. His eyes were that specific yellow gold that means old blood, the kind of alpha that doesn't negotiate territory, because he owns all of it already. Behind him came the chaos. There were riders, maybe 8 of them, all in black with silver insignia that screamed Crown Guard, all on horseback and very much losing that horseback situation. One mare was actively attempting to rear and bolt in opposite directions simultaneously. Another rider had his hand pressed to his ribs, blood dark on his fingers even in the failing light. The wolf didn't seem to notice them. He was moving with the kind of focused deliberation that suggests he was thinking about something specific, and everything else was just environmental clutter. Something to move through. Nothing that required his attention. I watched them pass, the massive wolf, the desperate riders, the swirl of dust and violence, and remained in my spot at the road's edge, basket of bread held against my chest like it was a shield that could possibly matter. The wolf had almost completely passed when he did something I'd never seen any alpha's form do before. He stopped. It was like watching momentum itself pause. He went from full predatory movement to completely still in the space of a breath, all 4 massive paws locked. His head turned, slow, deliberate, mechanical, and those ancient eyes fixed on me. I said, "Excuse me. I understand how this sounds. I'm aware of how it sounds. But here's the thing about being Omega. You learn very early that fear is a luxury you can't afford. Fear paralyzes you. Fear makes you prey. So instead, I became the kind of person who speaks like she has nothing to lose, because in most situations, she doesn't. It wasn't a scream or a plea or an attempt at deference. It was just the word. Polite. The kind of thing you say when you need someone to shift their belongings off a market bench, or when you're trying to pass someone in a crowded street. "Excuse me." Like he was a merchant cart, and I was late for an appointment. The yellow gold eyes didn't blink. The massive head tilted maybe an inch to the side. Behind him, one of the riders had stopped his horse. I could see his mouth open, the universal expression of someone about to do something catastrophically stupid. But then the wolf's tail moved. Just once. A single deliberate sweep. And the rider's horse made a decision to gallop in the opposite direction at speed. "You're in the way," I added, committed to this death wish now, "of my travels. Generally speaking." The wolf stared at me. I stared at the wolf. The riders had mostly scattered by this point, leaving only sounds of hoofbeats and panicked horses retreating rapidly back the way they came. "So," I said, making a small gesture toward the road ahead, the one he was currently blocking with several tons of supernatural fur and muscle. "If you could just, that direction." "Thank you." I don't know if it was the gesture or the continued insistence that he was merely an inconvenience to my afternoon travel plans. But something shifted in his posture. His head straightened, his ears, which had been flattened in that way that suggests imminent violence, pricked forward slightly. And then he moved. Not away from me, but forward, at an angle that took him off the road entirely and into the deeper brush on the far side. Trees as thick as my arm simply bent in his wake, because physics seemed to be more of a suggestion than a rule when it came to alpha wolves. I stood very still for a long moment, listening to him move deeper into the forest. The sound faded gradually, him leaving the road, moving into the darker sections, maintaining that deliberate, thinking pace. When I was absolutely certain he wasn't returning, I looked down at my bread. "Well," I told it, "that wasn't on the route options." I started walking again, faster now because my foot didn't hurt as much, when powered by mild adrenaline and the kind of bewildered amusement that comes from surviving something genuinely ridiculous. The shadow it took me maybe 10 minutes to notice he was pacing me. He wasn't on the road anymore. He was running parallel, through the trees on the right side, keeping pace with my walk like I was the most fascinating thing that had happened to him in several decades. I could see his silver coat between the oak trunks, could hear the soft pad of paws on earth and stone. "Are you following me?" I asked the forest. The wolf didn't respond, because he was a wolf, but he also didn't stop. He just kept moving when I moved, waited when I paused, matched my rhythm like it was a game he'd suddenly become interested in learning the rules to. This was new territory for me, literally and figuratively. I'd read the old stories, the ones the healers whispered about when they thought omegas weren't listening. About the alphas who chose, about the bonds that were written in bone and blood, and something far older than words. I'd always thought of them as cautionary tales. But there's a certain clarity that comes when you stop being afraid of dying and start being terrified of living. Because that's what this was. My body knew it before my mind caught up. He'd decided I was interesting. And in a kingdom where alphas own everything, including the right to decide who matters, that meant I was no longer on a road to anywhere. I was on a road that led to him. "You can't do this," I said to the trees, to the forest, to the wolf, who was still keeping pace even though I'd stopped walking. "Whatever this is, wolves do not follow omegas down roads they're not supposed to be on. There are laws. Protocols, consequences." He pulled ahead of me then, stepping into the road about 30 feet in front, and turned to face me properly. Even at a distance, I could feel the weight of those ancient eyes. "No," I said. And there was something in my voice that was probably more conviction than my current situation warranted. "Whatever happens next, I'm not the character who panics. I'm not the omega who cries or submits or does what she's supposed to do. I'm going to finish my walk. You're going to do whatever it is that alphas do when they've decided something matters. And we're both going to acknowledge that I have a choice here, even if that choice is only about how brave I'm going to be about having no choices at all." The wolf held still, and I held still. Then he stepped aside. Not far, just enough to clear my path, settling onto his haunches in the dirt like he was prepared to sit there for the next several hours. His tail wrapped around his body. His head tilted slightly, as if he was waiting for me to make a decision he'd decided to find intriguing. "This doesn't change anything," I said, moving past him. My heart was doing that thing where it forgets how to beat in a normal pattern, but my voice was steady. "You're still a wolf. I'm still late for evening camp, and I'm still not the kind of Omega who bows just because she's supposed to." As I passed, I could have sworn I heard something like amusement in the breath he exhaled. The night I found a clearing about 5 miles ahead as the sun bled out over the horizon. The forest had gone quiet, that particular kind of quiet where every predator within 10 miles knows something big is nearby and is giving it space. It's the quiet before violence, before choice, before everything changes. I built my fire small and efficient, laid out my blanket, and set up camp with the kind of practiced efficiency that comes from being Omega long enough to know that solitude is a luxury, but preparedness is survival. As I worked, I kept waiting for him to appear, for the massive silver form to step from the trees. For the moment where this quiet became dangerous, he never came. The forest stayed empty of him. But I could feel him, that specific, aching awareness that means you're being held in someone's attention like you're the only thing in the world that matters. It's not painful exactly. It's just impossible to ignore. Like standing too close to a fire and feeling the heat on your skin, even though the flames aren't touching you. As I ate the bread the baker had wrapped for me, I realized I never heard him leave. He was simply gone. The way Alphas disappeared when they decided they were done being noticed, like he'd made a choice about me, and made it complete and thorough in a way that suggested this wasn't finished just because I'd stepped off the road and said "excuse me" to a creature made of ancient violence. I kept the other half of the bread wrapped in cloth, and I set it out on a rock at the edge of camp. It was ridiculous. It changed nothing. And yet some part of me, the part that spoke "excuse me" to an Alpha's wolf form like it was merely an inconvenient merchant cart, seemed to think this story wasn't over, that I hadn't finished saying things that needed saying, that I'd only just begun. The return, he came back the next evening. Not as a wolf this time, as a man. I was making tea when I sensed him, and I didn't flinch. This might seem impossible. How does anyone not flinch when an alpha king steps out of the forest you've been camping beside for 12 hours? But I'd made a choice somewhere between the road and this clearing. I was going to be the kind of Omega who looked at the thing that terrified her and didn't look away. He was tall. Impossibly tall. The kind of tall that doesn't quite fit in normal buildings, probably doesn't quite fit in normal lives. His eyes were still that yellow gold, still ancient, still carrying the weight of centuries. But his face was young, beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful, all sharp edges and old violence worn into the lines of his jaw. "You have my bread," he said. His voice was lower in human form, rougher, like it was made of gravel and smoke, and the kind of certainty that only comes from never having to ask for anything twice. "I have my bread," I corrected, turning back to my tea. "I purchased it. You can't claim ownership based on presence." I heard him move, that peculiar absence of sound that means something large is being very careful about where it puts its weight. "You said excuse me," he said. It wasn't a question. I did. To my wolf. To whatever was blocking my road. I poured hot water over the leaves, and the steam rose between us like something alive. The fact that it happened to be a wolf was circumstantial. He laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised, genuine, the kind of thing that probably doesn't happen often when you're an alpha king. When you're the thing everyone else has learned to be afraid of. "I've owned this territory for 347 years, he said. I've killed things that killed things for a living. And you, small, Omega, holding bread like it's a weapon, told me to move like I was incidental. Were you not in my way? I turned to look at him now, let him see my face. Let him see that I was terrified, and also completely, deliberately unbroken. That was the circumstance. You were incidental to my travel. The fact that you're old and powerful and used to being the most important thing in any room doesn't change the fact that you were also blocking the road. He studied me for a long moment, and I could feel him doing that thing alphas do, reading my heart rate, my scent, the small biological markers that most omegas can't hide. Looking for fear. Looking for submission. Looking for the crack where he could reach in and claim something fundamental. He found something else. "What's your name?" he asked. "Kira. Kira," he said, like he was tasting it, like he was checking to see if it fit. "I'm King Aldrich." Of all this, he gestured vaguely at the forest, the kingdom, everything, you may have gathered. I had a sense. My riders tell me you're the one who stopped them from dying. I turned back to my tea. I said, "Excuse me." They ran. If they interpreted that as permission to live, that's their decision. You stood between them and me. I stood to the side of the road, I corrected. I didn't stand between anything. I acknowledged the existence of boundaries. He moved closer, and I let him. This was the moment where fear usually takes over, when the predator gets close enough that running becomes the only thought your brain can produce. But I'd made my choice on that road, and I was holding to it. "Do you know what you are?" he asked. "Omega, generally aware of what that means." "You're the first," he said quietly. "In 300 years, you're the first person who's ever treated my wolf like it was just a thing, like it wasn't the end of the world, like it could be told." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw it. Under the power and the ancient certainty, there was something almost like confusion. Like he'd built his entire world on the certainty that he was the most important thing in it. And then some small omega with bread had stepped to the side and said, "Excuse me," like he was just an inconvenience. Like he'd mattered less than her schedule. "What do you want?" I asked. "I don't know," he said, and the honesty in it was devastating. I've never not known. I've never been uncertain about anything in my life except this. Except you. And that's when I understood what he was asking. He wasn't asking me to bow. He wasn't asking me to become his or submit to him or do any of the things the kingdom probably expected the first Omega to do when an Alpha King decided she mattered. He was asking me to keep doing what I'd done on that road, to say no to him, to stand to the side, to treat him like he was just a thing in her way, neither more nor less than that, and see what happened when the most powerful creature in the kingdom had to face the idea that maybe he wasn't the center of the world. Maybe she was. The pivot we talked through the night. Not about power or bonds or the future. We talked about the smaller things, the baker in Torch who wrapped his bread carefully, the way the forest sounded different to her ear than to his, the specific kind of loneliness that comes from being the thing that everyone is afraid of. And somewhere between the second pot of tea and the first light of morning, I stopped being terrified and started being angry. "You think this is about you," I said, and my voice had gone hard now. All the amusement had burned away, leaving only the edges. "You think you can just choose me and I'll transform into whatever you need. A companion for your loneliness. A mirror to reflect your importance back at you. Someone to finally make you feel like the center of the world again." He didn't move. But something shifted in his eyes. "But I'm not going to do that," I continued. "I'm not going to spend my life being the Omega who said excuse me once and got rewarded with a kingdom for it. I'm going to keep saying it. Every time you try to be more important than my own choices. Every time you assume that power translates to right. Every single time you forget that I walked this road alone, and I can walk it alone again. Is that a refusal? He asked quietly. It's a boundary, I said. The only boundary that matters. I'll stay with you, Aldrich. I'll see what this is. But not because you decided. Not because I'm your mate or your prize or your solution to 300 years of being alone. I'll stay because I decide. And I stay every day I don't leave. That's the only game I'm playing. He was quiet for a very long time. Then he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay, and I knew, in that moment, watching him accept something that was impossibly difficult for an alpha to accept, that this was the moment where everything became real, where the story stopped being about a wolf stopping dead on a road and started being about whether two people could build something on radical, deliberate choice instead of biology or power or destiny, whether an omega could teach an alpha king what it meant to be seen as a person instead of a prize. Epilogue. The study months later, when I'm standing in his study, and he's realised I'm not going to break under the weight of his power, when he's finally asking himself how I can look at him and not flinch. That's when I tell him. I'm not running, I say, my voice steady in the dark. And I'm not begging. So you can stop waiting for me to break, Your Majesty. I've seen what you are. I'm still here. His wolf has gone very still in his eyes, that ancient, terrible stillness that means a predator is recalculating everything. And I watch him realise that the equation has changed. Because he finally understands, the most dangerous thing to an alpha king isn't another alpha. It's an omega who knows that she's worth staying for, who isn't afraid of walking away, who means it when she says excuse me and keeps walking. I smile, small and sad and absolutely unafraid. How did you, he starts. Say excuse me and mean it. I answer for him. The same way I'm looking at you now and not flinching, the same way I'm going to walk out that door if you ever try to treat my choices like they're ornamental. He reaches for me, but carefully. Like I'm not something he owns, like I'm something he's asking permission to touch. I let him. And that small permission, granted freely, chosen deliberately, given by someone who could leave at any moment, is worth more to an alpha king than any surrender ever could be. Because she's not his mate, she's his match. And that's the only thing that could have possibly mattered.